Difficulty is the Dark Souls of game design. I also don't really know what that means, but it sounds cool. And we are gonna talk about Dark Souls today, among many other games. Because how are you gonna have a video about difficulty and not mention Dark Souls? But first, let's go back though. Around 2010, the game industry was completely captured by the first-person shooter, following the success of Call of Duty. However, an issue with a lot of these games was that they practically play themselves. Enemies pose barely any threat, making most of these games just military power fantasies. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that, but it left a gap in the market for games that are willing to knock your balls off. But in came Dark Souls to knock our balls to hell and back, and many people loved it. Hey everyone, it's me, Phostus, with PH as in philosophy, photosynthesis, fried chicken, pterodactyl. Now I don't want to claim that Dark Souls single-handedly made sure difficult games still exist, but you can't deny the importance of the game in shaping the way we perceive difficulty in games as a whole. With its rise in popularity, difficulty also became a topic of discussion. People are talking about whether a game should have an easy mode, how challenging a game should be, how difficulty evolved over the years, etc, etc. But I think there's one thing about Dark Souls' difficulty that people tend to overlook. A specific kind of difficulty that very few games use in their design, some of which we'll talk about today. But I shouldn't get ahead of myself like the time I decided to become a Pokemon master. Gotta catch 'em all, gotta catch 'em all. Oh my! Right, so let's discuss the different kinds of difficulty that we are familiar with. 1. The set difficulty. The set difficulty is the easiest to explain by far. You just boot up the game and start playing. There's only one set difficulty level. The game will offer you a challenge and you can either overcome it or die. Good luck, bucko. A lot of older arcade games are like this. Pac-Man, Dig Dug, Tetris, but also games like Donkey Kong Country, Pokemon, Kirby, and most of the Zelda games. These games offer you a challenge, and if you can't overcome it, well, congratulations, you're now stuck. I hope you have an older sibling in hand to beat the hard parts for you, cause otherwise, the only thing left for you is to get good, son. Obviously, the fact that players can get stuck is a major drawback for this kind of difficulty, but it also has upsides.
Mario, Mega Man, Shovel Knight, these games have one fixed difficulty, so you know the experience is entirely tailored around what you're playing. It doesn't always result in a perfectly tuned game, but it does lend a huge sense of legitimacy to what you're doing.
And in that sense, I think it mostly differs from the next category. You know, sometimes you just want options. What can I do you for, young lady? We have just about anything here.
Hi, I'm looking for some female pants with actual pockets.
Get out of my fucking store right now. 2. Selectable difficulty. I doubt this is hard to understand. You start up the game and it lets you select how hard you'd like the game to be. Most of the time, one mode will be called regular or normal difficulty, implying that this is the way the game is meant to be played. But in truth, this is so subjective to each individual that you can only kind of figure out which setting works best for you. Some games only let you pick difficulty at the start, others let you swap it on the fly, some let you lower it mid-game but you cannot turn it back up. Some games offer an invincibility or story mode. Either way, it allows you to pick a difficulty that applies to your playstyle. Then on the other hand,
it offers you 4 difficulties, which if you're a grown-ass man still playing video games, still playing Halo 1, you need to cross these 2 off right now. Let's be real.
But you know what, on the other hand...
Sure, maybe the person you just beat was a new player, or a young child, or an adult with a 9-to-5 job who simply doesn't have as much time to practice playing this game as you do. So what?
Truth is, sometimes it's even hard to figure out what difficulty would be the most enjoyable for you yourself. Additionally, it is important how each of these different levels of difficulty is handled. If the different levels simply mean that an enemy has more health and damage, you may find yourself taking forever to kill even the simplest grunt, and that doesn't make the game more fun, just harder and more time consuming. The way these difficulties are handled directly influences the fun allowed on each level of difficulty. On the flip side, giving all enemies different AI for each different level of difficulty can take up a lot of development resources and time that could have gone elsewhere into improving the game. You can't always be asked to give it your all.
Ah, what a wonderful day for an adventure! This world is my oyster. I will venture into the great unknown and claim the treasures it hides. I cannot wait to see what the world has in store for me. On second thought, I will stay home and watch anime.
Yet despite all these downsides, selectable difficulty does offer great accessibility, especially if it has some easy to get into difficulty levels. Guitar Heroes hit whatever beginner level, or story mode in The Witcher 3, or invincible mode in Star Fox Zero. It ensures that little Billy, Grandma Cheryl, maybe even elite gamer Jimathan69 on a relaxed day can all play the game in a way that still allows them to have fun. This in turn poses the question, should all games have an easy, invincible or story mode? Again, before we can answer that, we should understand all types of difficulty, so let's move on. 3. Self-imposed. Self-imposed difficulty is an important one, and it's really important especially considering the debate whether or not a game should have an easy mode. Self-imposed difficulty is something you don't really notice. I think one of the best examples for this is the Mario games, specifically the 3D platformers. Think of when you're playing Mario Odyssey. The penalty for dying is effectively nothing. It's like 10 fucking coins. Papa Luigi will give you 500 or whatever for grabbing a balloon right next to him. So with barely any punishment for failure, how is the game still fun to play at every skill level? It's because the way in which the player tackles the challenges in the game is largely self-imposed. Look at this moon. I could grab the moon this way. And that's perfectly legitimate. However, I'm quite familiar with 3D platformers. I spent half my childhood playing them. So instead I'll try getting the moon using a lot fewer platforms and applying my understanding of the game's mechanics. And the important part is that we do this without even thinking. I didn't actively decide not to use all the platforms, it just made sense to me that there were other possibilities and that I will get more enjoyment out of this challenge if I feel like I aced it, like I did even more than was required of me. Additionally, because I got to set my own challenge, I'm probably just as likely to die doing things my way as a new player is doing things their way. Or an even better player going with even more daring attempts. Hey buddy, what are you doing up there?
I'm going to jump from here onto that rock over there.
I don't know, man, that doesn't sound like a good idea to me.
Nonsense! I've done more squats than I can count. My hamstrings are as hard as my dick. When I think about how hard my hamstrings are, nothing is gonna stop me now. Here I go. My hamstrings.
But Phostus, I hear you say, this is true for any game. If I want to play Banjo-Kazooie or Call of Duty with a blindfold on using only my feet, I damn well can.
And you know what? You're right. The creativity of gamers really shows when they find out new ways to make the same game more challenging or interesting with self-imposed challenges and limitations. You can find them anywhere. Think of the Pokemon Nuzlocke, the Green Devil challenge in Mario, Swampletics and the other 500 RuneScape challenges. Look at how popular speedrunning has become over the years. So then, if pretty much every game can have a self-imposed challenge, why even have this category? Well, there's two parts to that. First, you have to understand that these categories aren't mutually exclusive. The human mind likes to categorize stuff, and to make this video easier to understand, I did as well. But truth is that things in life are more like a multi-dimensional spectrum. But that doesn't really answer why I would label a game with self-imposed difficulty. I'd say that it's any game that incorporates this way of challenging the player inherently in the moment-to-moment gameplay. And more often than not, it's the more accessible games that fall into this category. In more simpler terms, if both me and my mom can just pick up the game and start having a good time, I would say the game falls in this category. Now then, before I reveal my final category for difficulty in games, I reckon it's time we start addressing the accessibility dilemma. I'll come out right away saying that personally I will always favor accessibility over exclusivity. Some people got angry when Star Fox Zero was revealed to have a zero difficulty mode, or when they found out that there was literally no way to die in Kirby's Epic Yarn, but why does it matter? You know those games where you can die like 10 times on a level and the game goes like, hey, you wanna skip this? Or hey, you wanna be invincible this time? Little Billy might be happy that he can finally continue to the next level and continue to have fun. Whereas I would go,
Fuck you, game, I don't need your help. I can beat your dumbass challenge. I'm a grown-ass fucking man and I don't need to take shit from a video game cartridge-looking ass motherfucker.
the assistance is optional and doesn't impact your experience if you just ignore it. If you know you won't be happy or satisfied beating the game with invincibility on, then just leave it off. If you know you don't care and you'd be happier to just see what happens in the next level or what story segment comes next, then Godspeed, my friend. So yeah, I do think every game should offer some options for accessibility. You see, when I grew up, gaming was for nerds. I was a nerd. But now gaming, the medium and the art form I care for so much, is finally growing up to be more mainstream. People of all ages, genders and ethnicities are discovering the beauty of interactive storytelling. I guess I can boast about how much of an elite gamer I am, because I can beat Bloodborne and they can't, but what's that gonna buy me? A sense of self-worth derived from the fact that I'm better than most at a video game? And I mean, even then, if Bloodborne had an easy mode, I wouldn't lose that. If I insisted on really being a Twetosaurus Rex, I could still boast about how I beat the game on the normal difficulty level. Only now I would find myself surrounded by people who have the proper context to appreciate such a feat. Because now more people from this inexperienced market will have played the game on easy mode. And just because they played the game on easy mode doesn't mean that they get to walk away with my achievement, you know?
So then, we were forced to participate in a three-legged race. And before you know it, our legs are tied together. All for bonding purposes, they said. Oi, Steve. More like bondage purposes, am I right? Hey guys, more like bondage purposes, am I right?
But that was my joke.
Oh, Steve, you're so funny. Do you wanna do the sex with me?
Yeah, okay. But now, I raise a counterpoint to myself. You know, that's what I love, the grey areas where both sides of the story kinda make a lot of sense. And the first grey area I want to point out is online games. Ooh. I'm gonna look at RuneScape, in which a challenge exists known as the Inferno. To complete this challenge, your account first needs to be really strong, something my character definitely isn't. You also need to be really good at the game, which I'm definitely not. Old school RuneScape currently has tens of thousands of players online at any given time, but the people who have completed this challenge are probably only a couple thousand. But when they did complete this challenge, they received the Infernal Cape, which is not only the best cape in the game for melee combat, it also shows everyone in the game that their PP very big. But now imagine little Billy, or anyone for that matter, can come in with invincibility on and get the same cape in a few minutes that others poured dozens of hours into. Now how do I know what size their PP is, man? People who poured all that time and effort in would feel cheated. Perhaps stop playing the game altogether if there's no real feeling of achievement anymore. Some content just needs to be gated off with a skill requirement. And you find it in other games as well. Maybe everyone can finish Mario Odyssey, but not everyone can do the fucking part with the 20 pixel perfect it's impossible! I don't care what anyone says, it's impossible, I'm out of here. And yeah, we're talking about non-PvP content here, but there's still a competitive element to it. Who is the first to complete this really hard challenge? And don't even get me started on PvP scenarios. No way Call of Duty or League of Legends can be made easier for certain players. Or can it? Recently, I needed to record some footage for Fortnite for my Real Gamers video, which you should all watch by the way, because it has like 30 views or whatever. Anyway, to provide full context, I'm not very good at competitive games, specifically ones with fast-paced combat like Fortnite. And the only experience I had with the game was when I played it for like 1 week, and that was over a year ago. But in this game, I killed 5 people and I won. Impossible, right? Yes, actually, it is impossible. Because I wasn't playing against people, I was playing against bots. Fortnite now puts players up against bots, partially to fill games up quicker so that people spend less time in the lobby, but also partially to allow lower skill level players to have more fun. These bots act just human enough that the untrained eye might mistake them for a fellow player. They even have usernames that are very likely to be another player. But if I can beat them, truly anyone can. In a clever way, Fortnite now makes sure that players who couldn't kill anyone can now kill someone, while players who could kill already can kill even more. But it does come at the cost of that feeling of legitimacy. If you win a game in Fortnite now, there's this uncertainty eating away at you. How many of my kills were actually people? How many were bots? What if all of them were bots? Epic Games seems to be in favor of having as many people as possible enjoy their game, and that's a fair move. One could argue in a utilitarian sense that now more people are having fun, thus making the game better, even if it is at the cost of some hardcore gamers their pride. Yet on the flip side, the reason people play online games is to pit their skill against others. The competitive nature is why they love the game so much. And since these bots aren't even optional, you now have a partly player versus computer experience, even when you didn't want to. Feel free to share what you think down below in the comments. I'm genuinely interested in what other people think on this topic, and I'll likely be down there reading all of them and answering most of them. And by the way, thank you for making it this far into this video. I really appreciate you listening to me saying stuff about things for so long. And I'll reward you by revealing the 4th and final level of difficulty I distinguish in. But only if you subscribe, of course. So do it now. Do it, please. It makes me feel happy. Thank you. This final level of difficulty, I think you'll really like it because I think it provides an even more interesting dilemma. So let's jump into it. Bum 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 bum. 4. Story-driven difficulty. It's finally time to talk about the unholy overlord of difficult games, Dark Souls. Dark Souls is a hard game. If Dark Souls is too hard for you, Dark Souls tells you to get good and try again. Luckily, there are several ways to get good. You can analyze the boss and its moves, you can find a weapon that works better in this specific scenario, you can deepen your understanding of the game's mechanics. You could kindle a bonfire so that you have double the healing at your disposal. You could hop online and find another random person to join you in battle. But no matter which way you slice it, no matter how many advantages you try to stack on top of each other, my mom is never gonna have a good time with Dark Souls. So the solution is simple, right? Slap an invincibility or story mode on there, mom's having the greatest time exploring Lord Ran and slaying demons and whatnot. But is that the game? Is the story that Dark Souls is trying to tell you purely found in the zeros and ones that make up the game's code? Or does it transcend the pixels on your screen and include you, the player, in its story? To understand what I mean by that, we'll have to dive into Dark Souls' lore. Don't worry, I'm just gonna mention some things that are in the opening cinematic. In Dark Souls, you play as an undead, which is a person carrying the accursed dark sign. These undead are not like zombies, rather, when killed they find themselves waking up at a bonfire. They never truly die. This means that their battles never truly end. All they can do is try again, and again, and again, and again. But such a fate for some may prove worse than death. When an undead dies, they lose some of the essence called humanity. Their physique becomes deteriorated, and eventually they lose their minds and start attacking anything and everything that's still alive. When this happens, they become what's called hollow. Now surely you don't think that these terms, hollow, humanity, were chosen just because they sound cool, right? Let's look at this again, but now we include you, the player. You are an undead, and you can throw yourself at enemies an infinite number of times without ever truly dying, because you have infinite lives. And with infinite lives, there really isn't a lot at stake. But every time your character dies, every time you face yet another foe that appears impossible to beat, you, the player, lose a little bit of your patience. Until at some point, you snap. You get up from your chair, you throw your controller away, and you yell "fuck it" and never touch the game again. But when you walk away from the game, that leaves your character without someone to control them. It means your character is without humanity, without a soul. And without a soul, without you, the player, there to control them, they are now hollow. Remember those other undeads that you fight, especially at the start of the game? They are exactly that. They are people who went on the same pilgrimage as you, but gave up, lost their minds. It suggests that maybe you aren't necessarily the chosen undead of legends, but rather just someone who pulled through. The game actively incorporates you, the player, into its story and world. Your perseverance serves as the driving force for both the story's progression and the game's progression. It's a shining example of how video games are interactive in more ways than just the literal sense. But what if there was no challenge? What if at any time you could just turn on easy mode and just breeze through the game? If the world has no struggle, then the first undead that would show up would solve the entire issue. No one would even become hollow. Maybe the story could work around it by removing all the hollow enemies from the game or something when on easy mode, but is that really the story that the game wanted to tell? Are in certain games story and gameplay just too intertwined to allow for flexibility or accessibility? Or should accessibility overrule this connection between story and gameplay for the sake of broader enjoyment and a broader audience? Personally, I'm inclined to go with that second one, but I don't think that there's a definitive right answer here. Again, let me know how you feel. Don't think that Dark Souls is the only game that does this though. Undertale, while not as hard as Dark Souls, can still prove to be much of a challenge for inexperienced gamers. It offers you the choice to either kill your enemies or spare their lives, with the second one often being friendlier but harder to pull off. The dilemma the game poses you with is whether you want to take the easy way out at the cost of others, or take a nobler yet harder path. Some enemies will fling themselves at you time and time again, really bugging you while you're trying to solve a puzzle, and you only have to kill them once to make that stop. Or are you determined enough to keep them alive? Determination, a central theme in Undertale. Determination not only to progress through the game, but to stick to your ideals, even as it gets hard to hang on to them. But again, if there's no struggle, no dilemma, then there's no determination required. In Celeste, you climb up a mountain which is not so subtly presented as an uphill battle your character is having with depression and anxiety. Soon, you'll find out that this mountain consists of an endless gauntlet of impossible platforming challenges on which you will die hundreds, if not thousands of times. But much like in Dark Souls, you get to try again. Maybe you're stuck on a part and you think, this is hopeless, there's no way I can beat this. That's how people feel when they're depressed. And much like depression, the only way to overcome your demons is to get up again, and again, and again. No matter how many times you fall down. Would that struggle really come across as well when you could slow down time, or increase your dash distance, or just become flat out invincible? All of which you can, by the way, in the game settings. I guess you could argue that everyone experiences depression differently, but then again, if depression had an easy mode, I doubt we'd see so many people suffering from it. Yet, Celeste's flexible approach to difficulty is generally praised, and it does allow for a larger audience to not only enjoy the game they otherwise wouldn't, but be touched by a story they otherwise wouldn't have seen, which may in turn help them through their own tough times, or allow them to empathize better with those around them who are having a hard time. I'm not going to end this video on a conclusion. I could tell you what I think, but rather than giving you my opinion, I think I've given you enough information to formulate your own, that aligns with what you find important. Thank you for watching this whole video. I never put this much effort into a video before, and I'm quite proud of it, to be honest, so I hope you enjoyed it as well. Please consider subscribing if you like my work, and have a wonderful day.